You love listening to your favorite artists, and we love listening to you. So let's talk. Click now to take part in our short survey, and you could win a month of gloriously uninterrupted music with Spotify Premium. That means you can enjoy all your favorite artists ad-free. Sound good? Then all you need to do is hit the banner now for your chance to win.
Hi, I'm Michelle Obama, and this is the Michelle Obama Podcast. I talk with the people I love about the relationships that comfort us and challenge us and make us who we are. The Michelle Obama Podcast is a Spotify original podcast. Join us. You can listen to the series for free only on Spotify.
Presented by Salesforce.
Jay Farner here, CEO of Rocket Mortgage. Making the right financial decisions has never been more important. When you turn to Rocket Mortgage, we can help guide you to those right decisions now, when they matter most. Mortgage rates are near historic lows, so now is a great time to call 8338-ROCKET. And if you need some extra money, a cash-out refinance could give you that financial boost you're looking for. Call today at 8338-ROCKET or go to rocketmortgage.com to learn more.
Call for cost information and conditions. Equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLS number 3030.
here with us this evening are board members Joyce Kostick and Marty Cardona. And I know that other board members will be on the Facebook feed, if not Zooming in really soon. Their investment in our schools and commitment to making sure that we keep our priorities and our child-centered vision at the forefront is their priority for our schools. I have behind me parent representative, PTA parent representative, Kelly Hodge. Oh, you could say hello. And
hi, everyone.
Kelly represents our secondary group to my left, her counterpart, PTA representative, Sarah Driscoll, who will be the K-5 representative. Tonight, we also have, to my right, Transportation Director, Dr. Peter Lawrence, who'll be sharing information about transportation and some of the questions the parents might be having. Way back in the corner, we have middle school principal, Mr. David Dunn, Martha Brown principal. Next to him is Pat Groh, the principal at JP. They'll be talking a little bit about our middle school programming. Dr. Karen Finger, who is the Dudley K2 principal, will be speaking on behalf of the primary school, and Mr. Ryan Charno, new principal at Jefferson Avenue School, will be sharing his thoughts and insights about programming from the perspective of elementary. Also here tonight is Principal Mr. Robert Clark, who will be talking about secondary programming, in particular grades 9 through 12. Once again, thank you all for coming tonight. Dr. Cook, I believe, is out there in the audience. Dr. Cook will be sharing insights as needed. Tonight's program is primarily going to be focused on our educational programming and transportation, but in this conversation, we do know that questions about the medical pieces that we're dealing with and the research behind it, Dr. Cook has been an incredible partner, so we look forward to continuing to hear from him. I want to start out by saying thank you. And I know that this has been an incredibly challenging time, and there's our puzzles that, again, as we continue to move down the road here, it's starting to get pieced together. And it takes an incredible partnership. It takes a genuine, concerted effort to listen and learn from each other. And that's what we've done here tonight. We're hopeful that you'll hear information that will help inform your decision as you move forward to make the best choices for your family, your children in our Fairport schools. I would like to thank again our PTA representatives who have just been on call, on demand, sharing, advocating on behalf of their constituents, and advocating that we continue to listen and learn. And like I said, hopefully tonight you'll be able to get a sense of how we have done that through this process, doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. I would also like to express my appreciation to our Board of Education, who puts in countless hours to ensure that everybody is supported and everyone has the right tools and resources to be success. Every year is a priority year. Every year we have to do our best, whether we're in a COVID year or in a regular school year. We need to make sure we're doing all we can for our students, and it starts with our Board of Education. So thank you very much. I'm going to ask Mr. Sliz to share some opening comments, his thoughts and reflections as we begin the evening.
As you alluded to, Brett, this has been a process that is was given to us by the State Ed Department, and we have been following their guidance. We've been following Monroe County Department of Health guidance. We've been following the guidance from Dr. Cook, who is also part of the State Department of Health and Monroe County, and it's been a very interesting road. We have had input from every department in our district, from the teachers to our cleaning staff to our our building and grounds, to our transportation, to our administration, to our secretarial staff. Every department, our food service staff has been involved with this process. And it just continues to evolve. And it's amazing, you know, this puzzle picture you have here really says a lot, because that's how we started. We're a little bit, actually, we're a lot more cohesive now. We're really starting to see the picture. You're hearing on the news at other districts what their plans are, and we have to take into account our financial resources. We have to take into account our personnel resources. We have to take into account our physical plants, our schools, and all the properties we own. And we have to, all this is part of this process. And then the seven members of the school board, who are all elected by the residents, we work with the whole team, and then we have to help with the guidance and say, okay, here's what will be best in the situation we're in. It's not going to be perfect by a long shot, but it's going to be the best for what we have.
Thank you, Mr. Sliz, and I'm sure we'll continue to hear from you as we move through the evening. One thing that I've learned from you, and you continually remind me, as well as other board members, is that this is an evolving, fluid situation, and we're doing the best we can with the information that we have at the time. We are in real time, and sometimes it's changes daily or even by the moment. I'm going to ask Dr. Cook right off the bat. August 7th is an important date. We see Mr. Buffin, who's coming in, Board of Education member. Thank you, Mr. Buffin, for coming. But Mr. Cook, Dr. Cook, can you please explain or share August 7th, the numbers that the governor has proclaimed as important numbers that are very relative to our school opening, the infection rate?
Sure. And let me know if you have any trouble hearing me. But the governor outlined the opening numbers. So if regions are in phase 4, at the beginning of August, and the community rate, transmission rate is less than 5% on a 14-day average, then schools can open. The second date is the date for caution. So if the 7-day case rate is greater than 9%, is 10% or higher, then schools have to go remote. And the reality is that if we are that high on a 7-day average, there is a fair amount of spread in the community, and it would be very difficult to really assure the safety we need. So the key really is staying on top of this, and everyone doing what we're doing to keep us in that low rate, because when you're at that low rate, then it is just much safer, and it allows us to get back to more normal than we were. So that's a really big phase here, and it is a cautious reason. And I think it's because I see and I share the caution. We have people traveling to other parts of the country. They're coming back to the area and easily can bring the virus here asymptomatically, minimal symptoms, and cause rates to rise because they're coming from sources we weren't thinking of. So it's something we have to be vigilant about.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. As we have said throughout this process, we will be following the guidance. We'll be engaging with our community experts. We're very fortunate to have supports in place and opportunities to collaborate with Dr. Mendoza, Dr. Cook, and our own medical director, Dr. Lenhard. These experts are connected to greater networks than we'll continue to rely on. This has been a joint community effort, and I think it's important that we recognize that we listen, and your PTA representatives have done an incredible job advocating, and you'll be seeing and hearing bits and pieces of that woven into this presentation. The first, right off the bat, I want to share that we'll be extending the deadline for the school reopening survey to Wednesday, August 5th. Okay, so that survey will now close on Wednesday, August 5th at 9 o'clock. Families may resubmit their survey, so please, even if you filled it out and if you're hearing things different or you're getting a change of heart, you'll have an opportunity to resubmit your survey. The most recent survey, it's timestamped, so we'll be able to see which one is the most recent survey, will be the official document we accept. Now, if you do not complete a survey, that's okay. We'll enroll your child in the hybrid model and plan for scheduled transportation. But again, this was something that community members asked for. and it's a reasonable request, and I'm grateful for the feedback. Tonight, we're here to talk about the hybrid model, K-12, the virtual model, opting in, and we're going to share details on transportation. What have we been doing, though, for the past several days? It's this next slide captures the 14 different categories that the state has given us. On July 15th, took us a few days to process it and understand it, and then we needed to rally around it. The administrative team has been amazing. My appreciation has been, it's great, and we wouldn't have been able to do it without their support and how they've mobilized and on moment's notice supported this incredible effort. This will be posted on our website, and we will continue to be developing each one of these categories as we move through this process. But over the last several weeks, or the last 2 weeks, I should say, this is what we've been focusing in on, and we're on track for tomorrow morning to submit our application, and that application will be on our website where you'd have to point and click and get a sense of our assurances that we give to the state. And over the next several weeks, again, we will be developing these assurances. Tonight, we're focusing in on the transportation components, the school schedules, the teaching and learning, and you'll be hearing a little bit about special education and how we're supporting our English language learners. So definitely relevant and germane to the reopening assurances that we need to provide. It's important that you also recognize this timeline. We are entering a phase where we are continuing to manage our sites, build schedules, cluster kids, talk about nuances and details that support the opening. As we move through August 7th through August 14th, we'll be talking about the academic, social, emotional readiness that we need to engage in. Our staff will be integral to this. We will continue to meet with our lead teachers, our teacher leaders at grade levels, our instructional coaches, our health and safety teams, just to name a few. Their input and their guidance as we move through the next phases, as you will hear from our principals, will be incredibly important, because ultimately they will be the ones developing the programming. And we're proud of our teachers, and I think that we have a really strong format for them to do what they do best, and that is make their experiences for our children meaningful and engaging. The third phase, between August 14th and September 1st, we're going to be looking at how are we going to get our staff completely ready, onboarding our staff and returning to school. Important dates for you to be aware of: elementary, K through 10th grade. We anticipate completing and communicating our hybrid cohort placements by August 10th. We will be considering families with multi-age children as we complete these cohorts. In grades 11 and 12, anticipate receiving information on your hybrid cohort placement by August 14th. Those are important dates to be on the lookout for as we move through the process and cohort, so you could plan accordingly. Please expect a district calendar adjustment by August 18th. I'll be working with our internal units as well as our Board of Education, be making a recommendation to adjust our calendar. There'll be more information about that adjustment in the very near future. There's going to be lots of planning and organizing, and as a result, we'll have to shift some of our conference days to the front of the year so we could start the year strong and ready for our students. I know many people want to talk about these details: social distancing, PPE, masking, how we sanitize, and there'll be an opportunity, I'm sure, as we move through this. But I want to focus mostly on how we are supporting our students and the programming that we're going to be offering via our hybrid schedules and other nuances from special education, and how we support students along the way, and of course our virtual model. I'm going to ask our elementary leaders who are here tonight, Dr. Finger and Mr. Charno, to please take the mic and share your thoughts.
So, Brett, would you like me to just review how the kids were cohorted
You could speak to cohorting, you could speak to the actual programming that we are anticipating in developing with our teachers, so it's, yeah.
So, as you know, students were cohorted into two groups. We started those cohorts by looking alphabetically first, A through K, and then L through M. That was our first lens. Is my mic not working?
Can't hear.
I'm pushing it down. Okay. All right, let's try this again. Sorry about that, folks. So our students were cohorted into two groups, and the way that we began putting our kids into cohorts was, first lens was alphabetical, A through K, L through M. But then we also needed to do some careful balancing because we needed to look at student needs. Say, for example, if a child receives special education services. We also tried very hard to make sure that we were cohorting siblings on a similar schedule. So we would look at students across the buildings, and if they also had specific needs, we needed to make sure that we were cohorting similarly based on what the priorities were. We also looked at the male-female ratio as well as just sheer student numbers. So for the hybrid model, what's going to happen is each cohort will be meeting in school in person with their teacher 2 days per week. So as you can see up on the screen, if you are in cohort 1, you would be in school Mondays and Thursdays in person, and you would follow a typical school schedule. Tuesdays and Fridays, you would be engaged in various Google Classroom distance learning activities, and those are all being developed by Fairport educators. If you're in cohort 2, you would be opposite cohort 1. All students are going to be engaged in Google Classroom distance learning on Wednesdays. And while we are still working through the curricular details, what we are thinking is that the morning will be spent on core academics, so ELA, math, science, and social studies instruction. And then afternoons would be spent special area and support services. And again, making sure that we are recording those kinds of things so that families can access when it's convenient for them.
Dr. Farron, can I interrupt and just ask a question? Because
Sure.
I think it was an important question that I think that the elementary principals were passionate about, and I know our staff is passionate about, and our parents will appreciate this idea of being consistent across schools and grade levels. How are we achieving that moving
That's a
forward?
great question. So what we are planning to do, we actually have meetings scheduled with our lead teachers next week, and then after lead teachers, we'll be meeting with some teacher leaders. And what we're going to be doing is planning grade level bands across the district so that we are ensuring that students that go to school at Brooks Hill or JA, Dudley, Northside, they're all getting a very similar experience in terms of what is being taught, the lessons that the kids are engaged in, and likewise, on the virtual days, distance learning days, that they're having a consistent program.
Thank you. And if I interrupted you, I apologize. I think you were speaking about those off days and that virtual Wednesday.
Yeah, actually, I think I got through the virtual Wednesday. Ryan, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to add to that.
No, you said that very well, Dr. Finger. I think just the one thing that we had talked about, we're really developing the Google Classroom learning on those off days, at home days, and we're looking at a combination of synchronous and asynchronous opportunities, but of course that's all being developed currently by administrators and teacher leaders.
Thank you. So if you have a child who is at home, they will have the opportunity to have a rhythm and pace to their day on the day that they're not in their cohort in school.
Yeah, one thing I think it's important to add in too, just on those days, we're making sure, I know a lot of parents are curious about screen time and how much time kids are actually going to be connected to a computer. We're really making sure that we are as developmentally appropriate as we possibly can be with regard to how much time a child is actually going to be online.
for certain. And I think that's something that I know our parents are sensitive to. And I heard throughout the past week and a half that, having a student sit in front of a computer all day was not ideal or developmentally appropriate. Thank you. Is there more from that slide from special education or RTI support for the K-5 that's worth reiterating or sharing?
So with regard to students that do have special education services, currently what we are planning is that boys and girls that are enrolled in our consultant teacher direct model, they would be in school 2 days per week, and then on the distance learning days, their special education teacher would be checking in with them at home to do either some very explicit one-on-one instruction or perhaps some small group opportunities. And then, of course, any child that is in need of any support services for reading or math, they would also have access to those. For boys and girls that are in our more restrictive environments, our 813s or our 1211s, those friends are going to be coming to school 4 days per week. So they would come Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday also would be a distance learning day for them. And we are hoping that we're going to be able to capitalize on some of the related services that many of our friends have support from on Wednesdays to minimize the disruption to their learning on their in-person days. And again, the RTI AIS for K through 5 students, that is going to continue to be provided in small group format, and that's going to happen both in person and also remotely.
Mr. Charno, anything you would like to add?
No, I just think the one thing that we actually talked about as a leadership team today was the idea of beginning to create that, what does the in-person and remote RTI and AIS look like, and that's something that's currently in the works as we're doing the instructional planning.
But there'll definitely be an opportunity for those pieces to be a part of the hybrid model.
Correct. RTI and AIS will 100% be a part of the hybrid model.
The next piece is something that, for families that have a preference, maybe there's a medical need or maybe a general discomfort in being able to return, is the virtual option K-5. Can you please take a moment to explain some of those pieces? In those highlighted pieces, you can reiterate, but I'll certainly make sure that we get to those highlighted pieces in the K-5 virtual option.
Sure. So for those families that are considering the virtual opt-in K through 5, we're continuing to try and develop what that's going to look like, but we are committed to making sure that all boys and girls would have opportunities for core area instruction. And again, we're thinking probably in the morning for that. Special area instruction would be late morning, early afternoon, and then any kind of support services or related service would be also in the afternoon. Within each of those time frames, time would be devoted within the instructional block for any type of individual instruction, small group instruction, as well as whole group instruction. And once again, exactly how much would be determined by their grade level and need. The one thing with the virtual opt-in that I think is important is the highlighted area. Obviously, this is a model that's going to be best suited for those students who are pretty self-directed learners. It's going to require home support from parents, particularly for our youngest learners, because this certainly is not the most natural way for them to be educated. It's going to continue to advance students in their program and engage them, but it's going to be through an online experience. Any commitment to this, if this is what you are choosing to do, we are asking that you stick with that commitment, and it can be reassessed in January. So it's definitely something that I would strongly encourage parents to give a lot of thought to, because especially for the age group at Dudley School with young children, I would feel that this would be pretty challenging.
Anything to add to that, Mr. Charno?
No, I agree with Dr. Finger, and I think that this is, not our ideal model. We love having the opportunity to interact with students in person, but certainly know there are certain situations where this would be a model for families to consider, and it's certainly a part of our offerings.
This is where the process has worked, and we have been responsive, not only from our administrative team, but our educators. They passionately want to own this, and they want to be a part of an online experience. That's why it's important that we try to get our numbers, we try to confirm them, so we could plan accordingly. Again, this will be delivered by a Fairport educator. There may be opportunities to use a BOCES element as we move along if there's pieces to this that we cannot provide based upon our student and staff need. However, we are starting with a different premise and a different mindset that this will be a Fairport-based opportunity that prioritizes our core classes. Thank you very much to our educators, to our leaders who are passionate about owning this moving forward. We'll have an opportunity to come back to some of these pieces, but just to continue to move through the presentation. In our 6-8 world, we have Mr. Dunn and Mr. Grove. Mr. Dunn is principal of Martha Brown Middle School, and Mr. Grove is principal of Joanna Perrin Middle School. Both are nationally recognized schools to watch as.
Good evening, parents, community, and staff. Great opportunity for us to turn that microphone on. Got a little excited, sorry. Good evening, parents, community, and staff. This is great opportunity for us to be in front of you. Just a big picture idea for at least middle schools is by the time your students come into our building, second week of September, it'll be about 6 months from the last time they've been in contact with a classroom teacher. So I can tell you that the classroom teachers are hungry for this opportunity to have your kids back in our schools. And we're fortunate that Deb Miles, sitting next to me, our Director of Student Services, has done a lot of great things with our counselors, our mental health staff, because the social and emotional needs and worries of your kids, as well as yourselves as parents, are going to be on the forefront of our middle school programming, especially as we start off in the first couple of weeks. We sent a survey out to just get a sample from middle school parents. We do have to have that parent orientation that we typically have in April, and about 60% of you want to do it virtually, so within the next couple of weeks, we'll be setting up a virtual parent orientation meeting for both middle schools to meet with our parents and kind of go through the transition from 5th to 6th, as well as follow up with some of the information that you're going to be hearing this evening. We'll also be taking a look at the opportunity to bring your students in, hopefully at some point before the end of August, to kind of tour the building, get a feel for where their classrooms are. But our biggest bang for the buck, I believe, is going to be in that first day of the cohort, because that's where your students are going to be coming into their classrooms. It's going to be business as usual. 9-period day, 40 minutes. They're going to have the full school experience on that first of 2-day cycle. Our teachers are excited to welcome them. They're excited to take a look at where they're at. I know that Pat Groh and myself sat in on many of the 5th grade, 6th grade transition meetings, and we heard firsthand how worried your 5th grade students were with the lack of closure, and we realized that lack of closure existed at every grade level, not finishing the school year as they wanted. So our teachers are going to be prepared to meet the social and emotional needs of your students, as well as to plan accordingly for not only their in-school lesson preparation, but that second day where they'll be home. And I know Mr. Grove will go into this in a little more detail, but that second day, there'll be some intentional planning around the information that your students will be doing while they're home on that second day as it connects to the first day lesson within the classroom. So I'll have Mr. Grove kind of walk us through those two models in terms of the remote as well as the virtual.
Thanks, Dave. On our, we've been working really hard about what that day during the hybrid schedule is going to look like when the students are not in the building with us. I know it's been a lot of questions that we've been talking to parents about and certainly working with our staff about. And while we're still formulating exactly what it is, maybe for every individual class, we're expecting, there to be work every day in those classes for the kids when they're not with us in the building from classes. That could be assigning a video to watch, creating a flipped lesson, assigning some reading and reflections, or a project that can be worked on at home. But that'll all be directed by those individual teachers to let the kids know what they're going to be doing and what that expectation is on those days they're not with us in school. We'll be using that partially as part of our attendance for the day to see if they're doing their work, to make sure they're engaged on those days where they're not with us, and trying to plan forward as we're going into those the days and the weeks coming up. The Wednesdays, obviously, we'll talk a little bit about a different kind of schedule for all students. All students will be virtual on Wednesday, but we will be following our normal schedule just as 20-minute classes. And that's where the students will get together with those kids. The Monday group, the Monday, Thursday cohort will be together with their Tuesday, Friday fellow classmates, and that teacher will have them all together to talk about what's going on during the week, what they've done so far, what they're looking forward to as that full group class, what they'd have if they were in for a normal day. So we'll be working on that. As we're talking about, attendance will be required each day, and we're working on that about what that looks like exactly, because we know for some students they'll be on those remote days. They may not be doing it in live time with the classes, obviously, because they'll have that time during the day to work on their schedule as they see fit and as they can, because we know some of those, they won't be exactly equitable if they're trying to do it all at the exact same time. So we know we're working with families to make sure kids will have opportunities to do that based on their schedule, whether it's because of childcare or lack of computers or any reason like that. So we'll be working together with families and students on making sure they have access to that. We'll also be spending our first couple days, not only with our sixth graders, but also with our returning students to talk about what this looks like. What does a Google Classroom look like? Making sure they know how to get on, making sure where to look for their email for their assignments from their teachers. We'll also be putting some things out for parents to follow along so they'll know, certainly on those days where students aren't with us, where to look to find what the assignments are for the kids and what the expectations are for that day for them.
So the consistency will be there between the middle schools. There'll be, again, a rhythm and pace to their day, opportunities to interact with their teachers, to get reinforcement opportunities throughout the day, extended learning opportunities, independent learning opportunities, reteaching opportunities, engaging in special areas, and so on.
And we'll also be working with our elementary colleagues to make sure that the cohort alignment for families is in place. So we're going to be taking the information if for some reason a second grader, let's say, is in a different level cohort from your last name, we will make sure that adjustment exists at the middle schools as well. So you'll have siblings all going the same cohort day.
Mr. Clark, I'm going to ask you to come to that microphone. I know that we're not talking high school yet. We're still in the middle school, special ed, and RTI, but we'll get to that in a second. But I want to address some things that I'm seeing out in the chat, and I know that you were intricately involved in, the initial planning. Why did we come up, or how did we come up with Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday versus like a Monday, Tuesday cohort and a Thursday, Friday cohort, or so on, or a combination thereof? What was the purpose and rationale?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it. Mr. Buffum is trying to address some of those concerns in the chat, so I'll try to do that for us here as well. The concerns about cohorting on days is not necessarily about cleaning the building. As Mr. Smith's pointed out on a couple of different occasions, we'll be cleaning the building every day. Our concerns in developing that schedule, and really the schedule around the county, is twofold. The first is that there's too large of a gap of instruction for our kids in the Monday, Tuesday model, and then Thursday, Friday model. That would present a gap of 5 days of instruction. And so we're worried about retention, we're worried about the social emotional well-being of our students, and a number of other factors in terms of, that piece of things. Another concern that we have just in terms of staying in step with the county are trying to deliver BOCES services that require some logistical collaboration in order for us to bring those services in concert. So BOCES serves all of our districts, and they've asked us to work collaboratively together to provide similar schedules so that they can deliver those services.
And, there was one piece, if there was a Monday, Tuesday cohort, there wasn't a lot of excitement about not seeing our kids for 5 days.
Absolutely, and those are the concerns as I shared about retention of skills and, essentially, again, missing your kids for 5 days, especially at the lower levels, and trying to gain any momentum instructionally. That's a large concern of theirs.
Another model that we processed at great length, I know people are always comparing, we looked at a half-day model, K-5, and the facts around our busing circumstances, the facts around our ability to sanitize classrooms, and quite frankly, the concern around half-day childcare. Those were options, and that was feedback that we continually received. It wasn't a good fit for Fairport. I know it might work for another district, but we feel that this model is best based upon the information that we have and how our ability to support our learning environment suits our needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could speak to that piece globally. Again, it's not my level, but to share some of the discourse around that conversation. There's also some value judgments that have been made in other districts with regards to what they're sacrificing in order to do that, in terms of not teaching special areas and pulling teachers. For us, it came down to the issue of not having enough staff and not having enough space in order for us to accommodate those concerns. So this is the model that suits us best. It's not a model anybody really loves, because we know that it has its shortcomings, but it really is the best for Fairport.
It is the best for Fairport, and every district has unique circumstances. We know that there's a neighboring district, or maybe a neighboring district or two, that may be able to bring in students K-5. We, based upon the resources, the staffing that we have, we're not able to achieve that. We tried many different ways and many different scenarios, but again, to achieve a K-8 or K-5 every single day, socially spaced, wearing masks, we did not have the staffing to pull that off. Other districts have their resources invested in other places. Ours didn't have resources invested in the paraprofessionals that will be covering those alternative classrooms in those other districts.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if there's much to add there. It's just a matter of, I know that because we live in such close proximity, there's certainly, so some of us live in those communities and understand different tax bases, different resources, different limitations. And although we're very close to each other, we have to deal with our realities and make sure that we do the best for our own kids.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Special Education Services, Mr. Dunn and or Mr. Groh.
I'll talk about the special ed services. We have a couple of different programs at Martha Brown, our 12-1-1 students, grade 6, 7, and 8, as well as our 15-1 students in grade 6. We're proud to say that they're going to be in classes Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So for those 4 days, they're going to pretty much get the entire spectrum of supports and services that they'll be entitled to with their IEP. Teachers will have full access to them all those 4 days. And on the virtual day, they'll certainly be reaching out to them, making sure that they're connecting with them on their homework, meeting with them in small groups. There'll also be an opportunity to do some conferencing with the students, as well as some of the transition training in the virtual day with the students on Wednesday. Our resource room and CT students, again, they'll be coming in every other day, so the special ed teachers will have contact with them each of the days that they're at school. And on the virtual day, as well as the remote learning days, they'll be reaching out to their case manager load in small groups to make sure that if they have any questions, they need any additional support on any of the work. And again, just like the gen ed teacher, the resource room teachers will be targeting that off learning day, that Tuesday or Friday, to make sure that the students have focused work, and again, checking in with them to see how they're doing on those remote days.
So individual education plans are a priority. The expectation is that they're fulfilled and that they're done with fidelity in ways that reinforce content and support social emotional well-being.
And just to add into our English language learners at JP, same thing, we'll be developing the program for them where, depending on their level of service, they'll be coming in on those days too. And we'll be working with those families to make sure they understand where they're at level-wise and what they'll be doing on those days in addition to the remote and virtual learning on the other days.
And those English language learners and special education families, there'll be specific reach out to those families so they're aware of how we're going to support them as we eventually return to school. RTI and AIS. RTI is response to intervention. AIS is academic intervention services. Mr. Dunn or Mr. Groh, can you please explain what those are and how we will be meeting that compliance and doing it with a high level of fidelity and credibility?
These fall into our tiered services that we use to support students. Our math labs, our literacy labs. They'll be on the kids' schedules, and we'll be meeting with them. When they're in person with us in school, they'll be obviously meeting with their teachers on that. These are typically every other day for the students. So in those remote times, and definitely on the virtual day on Wednesday, they'll be meeting individually with those teachers to talk about where they're at, what they need to work on, and how to support them. So it's a priority for us to make sure the kids, especially some that may have some gaps coming back to school, like Mr. Dunn said, after such a long layoff, it seems like, trying to make sure they're where they need to be and get them all the support they need. So yes, we'll absolutely be covering this and have it built in time with the kids on the schedules, both in school and on those remote days.
And you brought up a very good point. As we transition back to school, the social emotional needs of our students is the priority. We are going to be intentionally creating opportunities to connect and understand where students and families are, and to understand where students are programmatically, academically, where do they need reinforcement of skills, and how we can best support them and manage our curriculum moving forward. Our educators do this very well, and there are experts, and we're looking forward to solidifying those plans as we move through the rest of the summer.
Just wanted to add one piece, Mr. Provenzano, that we ended the year identifying a group of population of kids that maybe were having a hard time engaging last spring for a variety of reasons. We'll be creating some guided study halls that will be serviced like an AIS support, where they'll be with a support staff member to help them get through some of the homework, answer questions they might have. Might be a study hall with maybe 5 or 7 kids that will be supported by a support staff in our building, both middle schools, to help our students kind of catch up a little as well and stay on top of the workload.
Yeah, we realize that there's going to be an academic lift, and we'll be poised and organized and do it in a way that moves students along, that reinforces critical standards and skills, and I'm really proud of the collaborative efforts. Yep. We'll continue to build upon those. The virtual option in grades 6 through 8, again, it's worth emphasizing. Last week, I believe, I was leading with a BOCES model. This week, I'm leading with a Fairport-based model, and this was because we received information loud and clear from our community. This was their expectation. It was a reasonable request. Our educators were on the phone the next day advocating and saying that this is where they want to be as well, supporting our students, nurturing their growth. So Mr. Dunn or Mr. Gross, speak a little bit about the virtual option for grades 6 through 8.
Yeah, I think the good part about it being our Fairport based with our teachers, we can make sure the curriculum stays the same as their classmates that are enrolled in the hybrid part. So that part's excellent, just so we can transition back when needed, and they'll be in the same spots as the students that are coming on the hybrid model. We haven't finalized like what the schedules are yet, that like it would look like it would be a typical day or not, because that's going to be based around, you know, when we're using our teachers and what it could look like to make sure we can support those kids, whether or not they can do it like during those same times during the school day or not. So we're working on that, but the important piece is that we can keep the same curriculum for the kids so they can be following right along and not missing out on the Fairport experience, even though it's going to be that virtual model.
It's worth noting, again, this is best suited for those students who are self-directed learners. It requires at-home support, particularly for our middle school students. I think, you know, having a fifth grader and having had a couple of middle school children move through the ranks, they would need a little bit more structure. It advances students in their programming. It's going to focus on the core academic curriculum. There'll be an online experience. We're asking for a long-term commitment because that helps us keep our class sizes at manageable rates within the guidelines with distancing and masking. And we'll reassess at any point in January 2020.
I have a question regarding that. If a student were to test positive for the virus, then they would automatically go to that virtual for at least the 2-week quarantine period?
I think we'd have to be ready to pivot in
Okay.
between any of these models. And, you know, there's always circumstances that will have us monitor and adjust. And if you look at what I've been saying throughout the beginning, that's, I think, my fifth fundamental. We're monitoring and adjusting as we move it along. There are no hard and fast. This, though, allows us to have some predictability as we plan and get organized for our students. If students are moving in and out fluidly, that does not support a functioning and organized environment. But, of course, individual circumstances will influence us to monitor and adjust. Last but not least, we have Mr. Clark here to talk about the high school hybrid virtual option and some other details that are pertinent to the secondary 9-12. Mr. Clark.
Yeah, so I thought I'd just start by talking a little bit how cohorting happens at the high school because, well, the schedule looks very similar to the elementary and middle school schedules in terms of the days a week. The cohorting process is much more complex. So just to kind of explain that piece of things. And then to share an assurance that, yes, we understand that there are families across the district that might have children in multiple buildings. What we're doing here at Fairport High School is feeding off of the elementary work. We're building that from the bottom up. So if a family, let's say, had a student in Dudley, another student in Martha Brown, And then at FHS, we would align with Dudley for that student. But to the cohorting conversation, yes, the natural place for us to start is an alpha split. We cannot do it by grade level. I know there are questions around that, and kids wanting to be together, et cetera, in terms of grade levels, especially our seniors, our incoming seniors. Unfortunately, the complexity of our schedule, we have many, many courses that have multi-age students. So we might have a class that seats 10, 11, and 12 grade students all at the same time. So, for us, we have to start with an alpha split, and then there are also a number of other complex adjustments that we make in terms of balancing the level of the classes, the number of special education students that are part of general education classes, and a number of other factors. The other issue for us that makes things quite complex in terms of how kids are cohorted or how they have to move around the building is that aside from first period, where we know where everyone is in that fixed space, as soon as the bell rings, they go in 96 different places because we have 87 elective courses at the high school, a really robust. It's something we're proud of. It's something that has really been something that is quote unquote part of a Fairport education, but it makes it also very complex for us to cohort kids in groups together. And I know other schools, much smaller schools that have less opportunities for students, are able to keep them in a room and kind of restrict the movement of students around the building. It's really impossible with the robust programming that we have and a number of choices that our students make as they split up throughout the day, whether it be for music-based interest, art interests, business, et cetera, technology. Really, our students have so many different choices that it makes it difficult for us to do that. So again, we start with that alpha split, and then we make adjustments as needed with all the other mitigating factors, including the piece about aligning with family needs. Again, I won't spend too much time with the schedule in terms of the Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday. We've discussed that. Only the one piece I did want to focus on, I saw in the chat, there was questions from the community about what the words synchronous and asynchronous mean. And essentially what we're trying to develop, and we're looking for our teachers' input on this in terms of the delivery of instruction, is what are kids doing on the quote-unquote off days. So if they're in-person instruction on a Monday and a Thursday, what does Tuesday and Friday look like? Are they following the same schedule at home and turning on their computers and Zooming, if you will, into the class? Or are they being assigned independent learning through flipped instruction models that they talked about at the middle school level? And that's something, quite honestly, that we really need our Fairport educators to weigh in on in terms of the delivery of instruction, because much of it is determined based on the content, the course, the assessment at the end of the course, whether it's an AP class or Regents class, et cetera, and making sure that we're moving through the curriculum at a pace that's manageable for students and that we are going to set them up for success, at the end of the year. Our understanding is that we're going to continue to have those assessments. So we're in the process of completing that work right now. We met with lead teachers today. We're going to continue to seek feedback from them. So the synchronous part would be, attending class at home but on your computer. The asynchronous part of that would be, being assigned independent work, watching flipped instruction, that kind of thing, and not necessarily doing that. Now, there are mandates from the state of New York that we have to follow with regards to engagement and student attendance, and those are also guiding our decision. So again, you see the halfway down the slide there, it says attendance reporting is required each day. So, one of the concerns that you see in the feed and people talking about the experience of the online learning is that, it was uneven at times. And I think we were in a very different situation in the spring than we are now, having had months to plan and adjust. All of our students and all of our teachers will be using the Google platform. All of our students will have regular grading, traditional grading, so that would increase engagement. And so there's a significant amount of training for teachers to transition to this platform. And so that's a lot of the work that we are engaged in over the summer and will continue to be engaged in throughout the year. As far as the opt-in, virtual opt-in from 9 to 12, it's a little bit different situation. Again, based on the complexity of student schedules, we can have students all over the place in terms of what their options are, whether they're, again, students in the greatest need in terms of special education services, all the way up to students with multiple AP classes and offerings. So the virtual option for us, while we are going to be very much focused around core classes and working towards graduation credit, it's something that we cannot build until we know who the students are. This is very similar in some regards to our alternate education program. and that we cannot create the sections until we know who the kids are so that we can meet their needs. And so we're in the process of not only identifying the students that are opting in, but then looking at the complexity of the courses that they have. So we have roughly 34 or so kids right now that have done that, and every one of them has a different schedule. And so we have to figure out what the feasibility of that is, and our focus again is going to be on core areas, your English, science, math, social studies, and doing everything that we can, of course, to get state mandated PE in there as well. But there may be some issues for students around electives because it's just not something that's feasible. And again, depending on how we staff this, I don't want to get into too much of the minutia of that. This may not be done during the school day. It might be done after like 2:30, because if we're going to be using Fairport teachers to do that, we need Fairport staff available to do that, and they're going to be teaching throughout the day.
And this is where we would be able to, if we were not able to do it internally for the reasons that you just shared, to partner with a BOCES connection to provide an experience across the county that others are trying to fill as well. So the focus will be Fairport. The focus will be trying to have Fairport teachers fulfill and support our students, but we might be able to rely on BOCES to create opportunities that students otherwise wouldn't be able to get.
Yeah, and again, that cooperation has been around for many, many years. Many years ago, we had things called rating rooms, and we would bring students together from around the county when we couldn't meet needs individually at a given school. Usually more, focused around a smaller school, not one like ours that had so many opportunities, but we can do this very successfully. And again, I mentioned our alternate education program. We're very good at doing this model at 2:30 and after school, and using our Fairport teachers to really help a select group of students make it through to graduation. And we're confident we can deliver this model as well, but it will be different. It won't be during the day. And again, we may need to collaborate with BOCES to get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. There's other components from special education and to our English language learners, BOCES.
And again, much similar to the elementary schools and the middle schools, we're making every effort to have a similar continuum of services for special education that we do in a normal given year. And so our students with the highest needs, we're looking to have in the building initially for 4 days a week. And after we've had a period of time to assess where they are, we may even bring them in for further support. But that scaled continuum works itself down when we start talking about students in special classes, and we start talking about students that have resource room. And so the Director of Special Education, Mr. DeRozier, and Mrs. Leanna Watt, the Assistant Principal here in charge of special programming, are working collaboratively with special education teachers to ensure that we are delivering services in a meaningful way, and that we're doing everything we can to support our kids. So special education services and our English language learners will definitely have a continuum of service based on how their plans are already written. Slightly different, obviously, for the model, but we'll do everything that we can to meet their needs. As far as BOCES and EMCC programming goes, this is one of the unique aspects of school as well, and one of the reasons, again, as I said earlier, that we try to align with the rest of the county. And students that we have that are enrolled in BOCES programming, we have to make time in their schedules for them to acquire the hours and contact time at BOCES in order to achieve the credentials in those areas.
We're talking about 70 of our students approximately?
Yeah, generally we range for somewhere between 70 to 85 students every year that are engaged in programs like cosmetology, construction working, electricity, things like that. So, again, we're collaborating with Mike Arrett, and the principal at BOCES there, and a number of other BOCES leaders to make sure that our students that are involved in a bevy of BOCES programs still have availability to those programs, and they're in line with the rest of the county. And then the last thing that's listed there, just to talk a little bit about how we're increasing our efforts to lower the density of the building, is to reimagine some of you normally have a board policy because we want our seniors to take advantage of some of the great opportunities that we have here of requiring a 6+1, 6 classes plus PE, and we've relaxed that standard so that we can work with seniors that may be working, involved in an internship, some kind of other learning opportunity to release them from some of the classes that they may have signed up for. And then obviously those that are familiar with the senior privileges that we have in the building, we allow them to attach, a senior lounge to lunchtime, and that gives them the privilege of coming in and out of the school as long as they meet certain requirements. And that'll also help us lower the density, especially during our lunches, so that we can really, in those common areas, do a great job of spacing out in a socially distanced, safe way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. The last slide I have up here is in the event of another closure, and that's what Dr. Cook was speaking about. If our infection rate is 9% or greater, we would be moving toward another closure. We will have a process in place that would get students engaged in our Google Classroom platform. They'll join their classes daily through an online schedule. It will align with their current schedule. There'll be attendance requirements, and of course, assignment completion and grading will be a part of the process. This will be a new and upgraded version of what we experienced last spring, and we're looking forward to continuing to grow in this arena. Regarding special areas, to our elementary principals that are here, can you speak to what's going to happen with art and music and PE, even lunch? There's some questions out there I'd like to address.
Sure. So I'll speak right now just to lunch and recess, because I know that a lot of parents have been asking about that. To the greatest extent possible, we're really hoping that we are going to be able to utilize both our cafeteria and gymnasium spaces for kids to be properly distanced and be able to have lunch in those areas. It will greatly enhance the ability to get those areas cleaned in an efficient manner so that we can really get kids in, have a lunch experience, and then have them move on with their day. Recess will still be a part of a child's day. However, it may or may not be attached to their lunchtime. What we are asking is that classroom teachers are going to be providing their class a recess opportunity when it's convenient for the entire class. We're also in the process of identifying various areas outdoors around our buildings so that we can properly distance classes as they go outside. And potentially looking at some type of a rotating schedule, if you will. So maybe one day you go to the large playground to have recess. The next day, perhaps you go and you do some cooperative games on the sidewalks, socially distanced. We're working with our PTAs about potentially getting some games that could actually be painted onto the sidewalks so that kids could be socially distanced and still enjoy some outdoor time. So we're in the process of identifying all of those areas so that we can make sure that kids are getting ample time to go outdoors, get some play in, get some large gross motor movement activity going so that they can still have somewhat of a normal experience of recess in their day. With regard to special areas, because of the hybrid model especially, and basically having a repeat of the same day 2 days in a row, if that makes sense. So cohort 1 has, let's say you have music on your cohort 1 and you have music. The next day cohort 2 would have music as well. And so what we're looking to potentially do with our special area teachers is to create a menu of different activities that they could select from on their distance learning days. We're looking at creating, online resources for parents that would literally be a click and a 20-minute activity that kids could do that might be music related, art related, PE related, so that kids can continue to have exposure and do some extensions related to what they might be doing in person. Anything to add to that, Ryan?
No, I think you said that very well. The one thing I would add is that on the Wednesday virtual day, that would be a synchronous special experience for students. And then on the other at-home days, it would be a plethora of opportunities for asynchronous special experiences.
Thank you. As we develop special education and special educational options, there's a continuum of services, and that's been consistent on all the different slides, but we're looking at different ways that we could support and honor individual education plans, and that day in the middle of the week, there may be some opportunities to reteach, reinforce, do some different things, maybe even bring them in if time or the ability allows us to do so. So we'll be putting some more meat to those bones, and if you have specific questions about your child's special education program, reach out to your child's principal. Mr. Clark, did you want to say something about that? Or yep.
I just saw that there was some comment. I guess I didn't explain the Wednesday piece of things, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. You just actually did. But aside from affording students that opportunity for some pre-teaching, reteaching if need be, we're going to take some time to assess that before we bring students in. But we're also going to use that Wednesday time to we're going to be checking in with our students and have that virtual option. We have 20-minute periods. I think that's similar to the middle school. We tried to align with that because we have teachers that travel between buildings. So the Wednesday model at Fairport High School is aligned with the middle schools in Minerva DeLand as well. And there's a block of time within that day for our teachers to collaborate. They're going to be constantly modifying curriculum in a way that they're not typically used to. Again, teachers are used to modifying things and modifying assignments from year to year, but because of the pace of instruction is going to be different, we need to set aside time for our teachers to work together to keep those experiences normed across the board, as the elementary principals were talking about, making sure that they have similar experiences.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. And we're going to try to address childcare here because I see a number of interests in the chat line. We have wraparound care with the YMCA. We'll be confirming those details in the very near future. We're also working with the town of Perrington, and they've been excellent partners, as we've been saying throughout this process, that we'll be tapping into those resources, and I know that they're developing some options. But when you're talking about childcare, there's lots of process and protocol and pieces that we need to iron out. So we know that is a strong interest and need of our community, and we are obligated and look forward to trying to build networks of support. This is such an important conversation, and it's going to go beyond the hour because I think it's really important that we talk about what's happening with our transportation services. And there's many interested parties out there that are thinking about transportation. We have a survey out there that speaks to options and that will allow us to maximize transportation. And Director of Transportation, Dr. Peter Lawrence, is here to share some insights and protocols and perhaps address some questions as we move along.
Thank you, Superintendent Provenzano, as well as the Fairport Board of Education, for allowing me to participate in this forum. I've got 5 slides that I'd like to share with you guys, provide some information about what transportation's been up to and how we can support the community in getting back to school. So, as mentioned before, staff has been hard at work, from the mechanics getting the buses ready to our dispatchers and routers routing the buses, so we're at a good spot with that. Some of the steps that we're taking to make sure we're safe for going back to school: staff will do self-assessment screenings before coming to work, similar throughout the district. Something that's new that's really exciting is the routes have been mirrored. So typically our routes in the past, a lot of parents have had different drivers in the morning and in the afternoon. We've been able to have the routes routed for efficiency and also in a manner that allows the same driver in over 90% of the cases to transport students in the morning as well as in the afternoon. So that also helps with exposure to different people.
That's a really important point, is the mitigating pieces, and we do provide transportation. We're obliged and honored to do that. However, if there are opportunities and instances where families can share in this, it would probably be welcomed and a mitigating factor to reduce risk.
Absolutely.
Dr. Cook, what are your thoughts on that? I know that you had some thoughts. We've talked about that in the past on the importance of the mitigation, and that's a mitigation effort that might yield dividends?
Yeah, any strategy where you can keep cohorts of people and degrees of exposure the same is going to be helpful. So obviously, kids in the same classroom, maybe as few different teachers as possible is going to be helpful when any of the concerns come up, because there will be positive cases. And what happens with that is people get isolated. It gets involved, we involve the county in the contact tracing methodology, and that's how it begins. But if you have kids freely moving throughout the school, then who potentially comes in contact becomes much greater than if they're really confined to a couple of rooms for most of the day. It's a trade-off, and we do the best we can to try to reduce as much risk as possible. So if you can keep the same bus route, same bus kids, same bus driver, it's just another consistency that helps, when the unfortunate inevitable occurs.
Thank you, Dr. Cook.
Yeah, so hats off to Doug Kane, John Kidd, Corey Bowers, and Andrea Newcomb, because for years we've been trying to accomplish this, and they were finally able to do that. So thank you to them. Private and parochial and charter school transportation. So applications are due April 1st for those. However, when COVID hit, we did extend, the state education department gave 2 extra weeks, which would be April 15th. Our district extended to June 1st that the applications are due. We are accepting late applications as people are kind of in flux and making these decisions, which are not easy, until August 7th at the close of business. However, there are some caveats. We need to make sure any late application that there is space available, that there's no additional cost. So just be aware if you're in that position, you might want to plan on transporting your students initially. We'll do the best we can to help you, but everyone's facing some reduced capacity, which I'll talk about in a couple seconds. Social distancing at the bus stop is important. So parents, if you can really, have the conversation with your students about the need to, not have a free-for-all when they're at the bus stop, that'll help control spread. When students load the bus in the morning, we're going to end up having students walk to the back of the bus and fill in, so they're reducing the amount of passing time and opportunities for interaction. And then when we get to the schools, they will unload from the front to the rear. There's going to be controlled dismissal at the schools, not only in the morning and afternoon, so it won't be just kind of like and go, but it'll be controlled, and we'll work in partnership with the schools. Another item that parents should be aware of, when the temperature is 45 degrees or above, the windows will be cracked as well as the roof vents. So 45 degrees, 50 degrees feels wonderfully warm in springtime, but it is really cold in September and October. So I'd encourage parents to really make sure that their children are dressed appropriately so they're comfortable. So as far as cleaning of the buses, we're going to end up cleaning the buses twice daily. We have cleaning solution, paper towels, trash liners, all provided for the drivers. Between the routes, they'll wipe the handrails down as well as the top of the seats that a lot of times students will touch. We end up doing a disinfection nightly, which will involve fogging of the buses with a spray. We've got 9 different fogging units that will be here for the start of school. As far as seating, we're doing 1 student per seat. So if you see 22, 10, 6, 22 is the number that will fit on a large bus. So we typically have the capacity of 66 or 65 students per bus as a maximum. And we've reduced that based on guidelines, recommendations from CDC, Department of Health, and other organizations down to 22. So we're at a third capacity, which also contributes to the need of why we have to split the schools the way we do. It's a matter of numbers. 10 is for small buses. Typically, we have 28 passenger buses. We're going to reduce that down to, again, 1 per seat, which will be about 10, and in some circumstances, 6. Siblings will be seated together, so if you see a bus that has more than 22, you do the quick math, you're like, wait a second. It's probably because of siblings. We're going to try to seat them together and still maintain social distancing. Assigned seats. This is, again, a strategy that we're using to try to help with, as Dr. Cook had mentioned, contact tracing. Students in grades kindergarten through 12 will have assigned seats. So there again, should someone contract COVID-19, it will help with the contact tracing that the Department of Health will have to work through. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, face coverings are required on the buses. That is from the State Education Department. Very clear guidance with that. We will have spares on the buses, so if someone's mask breaks, someone forgets their mask, we have provisions for that. We'll have gloves for drivers in attendance that have direct contact with students, and students who cannot tolerate face coverings, there are provisions for them as well. Parents will probably have to submit a medical note from their primary care physician to the lead nurse along with a HIPAA form so they can verify that. Like I said, space is really an issue, so we need to work through that. But students with special needs or who have a medical condition will not be refused transportation because they're not able to do a face covering. However, students who refuse to wear a face covering, general education student who has no problem, either they choose to not wear them, they will have options as well. We're all about options. They'll have the option of the Shoe Leather Express to walk. They could ride their bike. Their parents could take them to school. If that doesn't work, the distance learning model might be in the future. But we are required to mask or use face coverings on the school bus. Language is very clear from SED. Hand sanitizer is not permitted by New York State Education Department. So not on the bus, not on the person, being the driver or the student. So that's something to be aware of. In the next page. Visitors, this is new. This will be a little culture shock for, a lot of us. But there are restrictions into the building. They're again trying to mitigate risk in any potential spread. If you have to come to the transportation center, please call ahead and say, hey, I'd like to come down. We've got our phone number there, as well as other buildings. There's, going to try to do their best to reduce possibility of transmission. So one of the challenges, and I'm very appreciative of the community participating with the survey. Superintendent Provenzano has shared the results with me, and there's a lot of people that are driving, which is great. The one thing I want to tell you is I appreciate that you're driving, but we also need to work as partners with the transportation. The schools were already kind of taxed with traffic before COVID hit. So really, as drivers, we need to have patience to be, slow down, be patient. We've got walking students who are using bicycles. When buses come, if you can, give them the courtesy to get in, and when they're leaving, if you can, hold back, just because the buses that leave the high school, Minerva DeLand and Jefferson Avenue in the afternoon are critical that they get out in a timely fashion. If they don't, it just dominoes effects takes place, and Martha Brown, Johanna Perrin become late, and then it trickles down to Brooks Hill and Northside and Dudley. So it's important that we work together. Also encourage you, if you pick up at Jefferson Avenue, Brooks Hill, Martha Brown, or JP, Johanna Perrin, consider making a right turn out of the building. If you look at that infographic, UPS estimates that they save 10 million gallons of fuel each year and save between 6 and 8 fewer miles per route. It does save time, it saves miles. It will help with traffic flow if we work together with that. Finally, we are hiring school bus drivers. There is a national shortage, so if you've ever thought about it, please let people know and apply. We offer some great benefits, paid training. We give you a company car, the yellow limousine, valued at over $100,000, and the opportunity to work in the newest school building within the district with great people and become a part of the school community. That's all I have for now, and happy to answer any questions after.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lawrence. I do have to just put a thought out there. As I was leaving my house today, we were talking about the hybrid model and what we're considering as a family. And my wife's a professional; she actually works in the medical field. My hat's off to all of our medical professionals and frontline providers. I'm grateful for your service. But childcare is a real conversation, and it's not something that we are taking lightly when we're saying we're trying to develop inroads and networks. I understand it. I get it. And I know that, Mr. Stevens, who is supporting that, along with Mrs. Miles, who's our Director of Student Services, we know what's at stake for families. And, we do have time to develop answers, to develop networks, and please know that that's a priority. And it's also part of our reentry plan. So I just want to acknowledge that, from a personal level and from a educational leader who serves that need and interest for our community. Please know that. I'm going to ask our PTA reps. You've been very patient. You've given us a lot of questions in advance, and we were trying to weave some of our presentation into that. So at this time, we want to take a few moments to give you an opportunity to add some questions or some thoughts. We'll stick on the line for another 10 minutes or so, but I do think this is important enough to extend it. I appreciate everybody's patience.
My first question is for Mr. Charno. Will band and orchestra still be offered to 4th and 5th graders?
So that is something I believe that Pam Serrani, who's the director in charge of that, is still working the logistics out and meeting with those teachers and making those determinations. Brett, am I correct? Do you know?
Yeah, we'll be looking at ways of doing it differently. We will not be, because the guidance says, right? I mean, it's 12 feet and distancing really makes it challenging with the amount of numbers that we're talking about. But, what does that mean for lessons, right? And could those be done virtually, offline, outside of school? I know that they're looking at different options because we know that the arts are very important, and we have a group of committed educators who are trying to find creative and meaningful ways to connect with our students in that capacity. It might look different. We won't be doing, large group concerts. Again, this is the guidance. This is what we are required to follow to reduce and mitigate. But, how do we do it? Do we do it differently? We're developing that with our educators. It will be within the guidance, though, and we are required to stay within that guidance.
Will you be adjusting start and end times for any of the buildings? I know specifically JA starts very close to what middle school does. So if a parent is choosing to drive, how do they get to those schools in a
Thank you. Great
manner?
question.
So we were given the charge as a committee to kind of look at that. We've done a lot of research over the years, and we understand best practice and whatnot. But unfortunately, the number of drivers that would be required for us and the number of buses don't make that a feasible option for us to change any of the existing start times. So at this time, the answer would be no.
As we transition and we are having traffic patterns and we have drop-offs and pickups, Dr. Lawrence, I know that, we actually just met about that this morning. Did you want to provide a little insight as to, we're talking about it, that will be part of our communication plan as we start the year and as we finalize it, because we know we have to manage traffic patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. So traffic is a challenge, as well as the bell times. The good news with the hybrid schedule, we have less students, so it should, as far as dismissing in the afternoon, we have less students to get on the buses. We're confident that it should be better than if obviously everyone was there, or it'll at least be normal.
But it will be done in a methodical way. It's just not going to be your regular dismissal. There'll be opportunities to thoughtfully plan and get organized around our arrival and dismissal times.
It's kind of
Yeah,
the
so-
model of.
Yeah, Brett,
Dr. Finger, yep.
I was going to say, one of the things that I saw coming through the chat was about that drop-off and pickup time, especially at the elementary buildings. And certainly, one of the big things we'll be doing is making data-driven decision-making from the survey that's now August 5th. So once we have the data on the number of students who we know will be taking the bus versus students we anticipate that will be dropped off, we'll then be looking at our traffic patterns. One of the things that Dr. Lawrence just mentioned was, for example, at JA, taking a right turn out of the parking lot would really increase our flow of traffic. So we'll be looking closely at traffic patterns, at drop-off time and possibly staggered drop-off and structures. And then at pickup time, I know many people were mentioning in the comments, will they have to get out of the car, come in the building, sign students in? And for efficiency and safety, we'll be working on a plan where there'll be some sort of possibly a tag that is affixed in the family's car that matches the same tag that's on the student's backpack. And we will have a way that it will not require the parent to get out of the car, come and sign, but staff members will be working to then bring those students to those families in an efficient manner, in a safe manner. And again, that might require a staggered approach and using different parts of our parking lots. But those are all things we're looking at to make sure, number one, our students are safe, and number two, we're increasing our efficiencies.
Thank you very much. Dr. Finger, did you want to add something to that?
Nope, he covered it. The one thing I guess I would just tag on is with the pickup, the tag system would only be for those families that are consistently picking kids up. If a child had a dentist appointment or something like that that you needed to get them for and we're picking them up, that would require you to park, come in, and sign the child out.
Thank you.
Can I just piggyback on that real quick for the 612? So this would be more in line with kids being dropped off early or staying after school, and how would it be handled? Kids kind of getting there early. Where would they be? Would there be somebody kind of monitoring the situation, or would they all be kind of just congregated together?
We've always had a minimum of 7 o'clock drop-off for students. We have a general foyer area where the kids would hang out. Obviously, in the COVID times, we'll probably push that into one of our dining halls so we can kind of socially distance them. And we do have a staff member that is there supervising them. 7:30 is generally when the first bus arrives. At that point, then our teachers hopefully will be in their classrooms and in the hallways, again, monitoring the students as they come in the building.
Would that be same for the high school? Sorry.
No worries. So with regards to the high school, most of our drop-offs take place between 6:45 and 7:05. Majority of our buses are here by 7:05 at the latest. Our earliest students that get here are usually urban suburban students. So we're going to collaborate with our staff to have classrooms open by 7 o'clock to get students in there. We're going to be doing breakfast a little bit different. It'll be grab and go, so that they're not congregating. Our students generally in the morning congregate in 2 or 3 places, either in Cafeteria C where we serve breakfast, the library, or in the back of the building. And so we're going to open the classrooms earlier. Obviously, as stated previously, we're only going to have half of those students. And we also may have less seniors, just in terms of if they start their day with the senior study hall, we're going to, again, extend that senior privilege and bring them in a little bit later so that we're not just bringing students in for, to sit in common areas. So, again, the answer is to collaborate with our teachers to have those doors open and to give them access to a classroom.
And could I ask this question too? I know we touched on it a little bit a couple times, but just could you specifically talk about how, I guess maybe it would be more for the K-5 world, but cohorting kids by neighborhood as opposed to grouping alphabetically or otherwise. And again, it would probably be more for the K-5 kids.
Yeah, and if there's a principal who wants to jump in, I'll start it off. Our priority is about balancing class sizes equally, so we can meet the guidelines that we're obligated to follow. And we also don't want to create, segregated schools or areas where, we are forced to bring in only certain sections. We believe that heterogeneously grouping students is the best and most effective way to promote learning, enhance the learning experience. But again, you couple that with the mandate of balancing class sizes, because we can't guarantee that, in my neighborhood, that there is a cross-section of K-6 students. So I think, that's another factor. It's balancing those class sizes and making sure that we have heterogeneous groupings from multiple different neighborhoods.
Just to add to that, for those same reasons, all of the principals did collaborate and come to those same conclusions. So it wasn't just something that we were told. We kind of all felt that there was a lot of strength in our schools with having the diversity as opposed to the segregation. So all of the principals kind of wrestled with that a little and thought this was our best for our schools.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted you guys to have an opportunity to address that because I know it's something that recurs, and I just wanted, there to be a definitive answer. Do you have any more for transportation, or do you want to move on?
What's been coming up a lot based on childcare needs is parents using neighbors or friends to help watch their kids on the days that they are off. Are you going to be handling any sort of special requests like that, or are you just doing the alphabetical split?
I believe you're talking about, again, with regards to cohorting, correct?
Yes, K through 5. So there's
I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about transportation, Sarah. I'm sorry. I was lost there for a minute. It's very hard to handle special requests. I'm just going to say that straightforward, because if I do for one and I can't do for all, that's really difficult. That said, what I have been telling parents is to make sure that you contact us. And as we begin to do the cohorting, oftentimes there is a situation that we can rectify pretty easily. If we can make it happen, we will, but we simply can't make promises.
And now, again, I would just reiterate for the secondary, buildings at really middle school on up, our students start to make choices that make that impossible. And as soon as they start to make a choice about a language, as soon as they make a choice about taking advanced classes and that kind of thing, that's literally impossible for us to do.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. One thing I want to address from the chat line is the access to technology. That's one of the biggest challenges, and I know that, that's something that we made it a priority to, is to order Chromebooks. The complication with that is the whole world, literally the whole world has been ordering Chromebooks, and we're working with different suppliers trying to expedite our ability to purchase and bring Chromebooks in. We do use the Google platform. Chromebooks are computers that we do use, and we will be looking to get Chromebooks so we can achieve a 1-to-1 ratio. Right now, we're not at a 1-to-1 ratio, but we have ordered. We plan for it in our budget process, and the challenge lies in the world's challenge. And I don't know if I could say that any better. And I'm an optimist. I know that our team, our purchase agents are looking for multiple different vendors to purchase large volumes so we can provide and be ready to go as we start the year. I'm looking at our technology director, Tom Devitt, who's here and who's it's been one of his personal missions, as well as looking for ways to support Wi-Fi access, and that's part of our plan as well. Working with different vendors to try to support those families who need that. What I think is a rite of passage these days is access to a viable network. So those are pieces that we're managing and working on and using our resources to try to support families as we move along. But there is a world global shortage and issues with the supply chain that we're navigating.
At the last town hall meeting, you said that packets would be sent home for the independent study days. For kids that are going to be in the virtual model, will they be able to pick up printed packets from the school to work on?
I would let our principals answer that question.
Was that question for the full virtual model or the virtual days at home in the hybrid model?
For the full virtual model. So we had talked about packets being sent home for kids that are in the hybrid when they're not in school. For kids that choose the hybrid, will they have access to packets as well? That they could pick up?
Planning, I don't think we got down to those logistics, more of the framework for submitting the proposal and then digging deeper now that's submitted.
Mr. Clark, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just guess, I think we're getting into the minutia of like the actual lesson planning, and I think that, we need the opportunity to collaborate with Fairport teachers. It's a model that like we've literally built in the last week. And so I would imagine that if Fairport teachers are teaching that, then part of the delivery of the instruction will involve the packets, and depending on the core areas that they're doing, we're really getting into the details of day-to-day instruction, and so that's something they need time to plan for.
But it's something we've also heard too, and
Absolutely,
I think that that's a great piece of information that I know that we'll be responsive to.
I think it also coincides again with the technology piece of things. So when and if we have the opportunity to go one-to-one, there's a developmental appropriateness to the technology that's being used, and where packets are more appropriate and where the computers are more appropriate.
Again, our full online model will be supported by our Fairport staff in our Google Classroom. There was a question out there if we have to go on a full closure again, like we did in March. We will be able to pivot to a full online schedule using the Google Classroom supported by our Fairport teachers. Those who are already on a virtual schedule would stay with their course or mode of action.
Can I ask a question regarding that? Dr. Cook, I'll need your advice on this as well. If we were to have to shut down, minimum would be, we don't know, at least 2 to 4 weeks?
Minimum 2 weeks at least, because it looks like the tracking will probably be on a rolling 2-week average. But it also depends on to what level spread is in the community. If it continues to accelerate, and what other strategies are taken. So if a school itself closes down because there's a lot of cases in the school, but the community seems to be okay, that's different than if it's a community-wide closure. So I think what you're asking about is more if it's a community-wide closure, we're talking about 10% spread throughout the community is pretty high, and it's going to take rolling back to phase 1 type of strategies to blunt that. So I would argue that if it's 2 weeks at the minimum, that would only be in the case of like a building, perhaps. But I would anticipate it's going to be longer, probably at least 4. But it depends on how broad or extensive the lockdown or shutdown is.
Thank you. I think it's also important to note that the hybrid plan and the full at-home plan, the full virtual plan, these are plans that we are planning for the entire school year.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're required to be able to pivot in between multiple different modalities, and the way that these plans are set up, we'll have to be organized to do such. The one thing that I want to mention is, I'll let Mrs. Miles get ready to answer if she wants to develop, or maybe I'll just do it well enough, but we'll be planning for masking breaks, right? I mean, people speak to the fact of masking and how challenging it is, and truthfully, it is challenging, and our educators know this, but the guidance is 6 feet in masking. We also know that we'll be using spaces differently, and our educators will be sensitive to those masking breaks, particularly when we're looking and speaking to our younger students and their need to take a respite under the right conditions. And it'll be great learning opportunities, modeling, and the first few days of school, I could see us spending time having and developing some protocols that we're all on the same page moving forward. Those masking breaks will be intentional and needed. Sorry, I was trying to give you enough time to walk up to the stage, but I wouldn't, so.
Can't hear.
But it is necessary to mitigate the risk. So, so we will certainly work with behavior modification plans, with whatever kind of methods that we need to you know, support the students individually before getting into any kind of code of conduct kind of situation. And we've seen that in some of the feeds. We've seen that in some of the feedback in our typed up questions. So, you know, we know that we need to mask, we know that we need to mitigate the risk, but we know that we also are working with children and we need to approach that in a manner that is appropriate for them. But as a parent, you know, that is part of making your decision about the type of program that you're going to choose here. The other piece, if it would just maybe relieve a little bit of, you know, anxiety about the childcare, is I did have the opportunity to speak with Chris Dudley today, who is the director of the childcare program at the YMCA. So he is very committed to supporting our families and our students to the best of their ability. We are continuing to hold our before and after school programs, you know, when we open schools, just as we have in the past. So all of our 4 elementary buildings on the same schedule mode that they have done previously will be holding our SAC program, our school-age child care program, before and after school. He is working with the department that oversees them, the Office of Children and Family Services, in terms of the regulations that they have to abide by, but also going to align with the school district and making sure that kids understand there's a consistency between our school day and their child care program in our buildings. He is also committed to trying to support families on the off days. So if your child comes on a Monday, Thursday, they will have access to the school-age childcare program on those days. You have to sign up through them, and obviously there is a fee for that daycare, but certainly I would suggest that if that's also a concern, you may need to reach out to him. There may be some scholarships or things available to help support, but that will be available on the days that your child is physically in school. So then on the off days, he is working and hoping that they're going to be able to pull together a full-day childcare program for those off days. And there will be flexibility to, you know, like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. It won't have to be alternate days. So, but he is committed to helping support our community. He's working with many, many school districts across the county to do that. And we look forward to hearing more from him in the very near future. I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Miles.
So I just have, I know we all ran down, you know, kind of what, you know, it would look like in the hybrid model, the virtual model, but I think parents still, who are on the fence, who are still trying to make the decision, need to just know kind of what those days will look like, whether they're in school, whether they're in home, or whether they're virtual. I think they need to know what the flow should be or what the expectation will be.
So for a couple of them, when their students are in school, you know, on the cohort, say the Monday they're in the building, like Mr. Dunn said earlier, that's a regular day. They're going to their classes, you know, obviously different practices in some of them, like with social distancing and all that, but it's a regular school day. That group that stays in there Monday and they're home Tuesday, you know, on the remote learning from home, they may not have that instruction one-to-one live from a teacher that day, because those teachers obviously will be teaching the kids that are in on that Tuesday cohort, but there will be definite guided instruction specifically for that day about what the kids would be doing at home. Now again, whether that's a short video from a teacher or a totally flipped lesson or the assignment, it'll be clear, you know, and part of our goal is to make it consistent and manageable, not only for the students, but so the parents can know where to find that information, you know, on that day, whether it's right in the teacher's Google Classroom, and what the expectation is for the students that day, you know. Then the Wednesday again, they'll be meeting, there'll be a 20-minute class with every kid on the Google Meet with all their teachers, live and in person, that virtual day on Wednesday. So it's definitely not the same, obviously, being in school every day, but we're trying to make sure the work is there to be done every day so the kids have that consistency of school. So it's not after, you know, if they're in there on Monday, it's not like, okay, read a chapter and I'll see you on Thursday. You know, we know there can't be those gaps in there, and that's why we want to make sure we're seeing the kids and communicating with the kids. The teachers will have office hours so the kids can email questions if they have it about an assignment too, even on those days they're not there, so the teachers can respond that way.
But there's a blend of opportunities, and I use the word modalities, and in my mind, when I hear that, there could be, like you said, that flip lesson, but it could be a reteaching opportunity with a specialist going in to support a group of kids because they just didn't quite get a concept. Or maybe there would be an opportunity for a child to Google Meet into a classroom session to rehear or to relearn a concept or to be a part of a group read aloud. Again, multiple different ways. Our educators, our experts, I'm confident they'll be able to do that in a creative way. I'm going to ask Mr. Clark to come forward a little bit because when you're talking about 9-12 programming and high-stakes exams like Regents exams, those are still on the docket, and delivering that in a way that keeps the curriculum moving forward while making sure that our students keep up to speed and our educators are allowed to do what they do best.
Yeah, so, one of the biggest changes, obviously, from last spring, I think, is that, as we waded into this on a 2-week basis and kept getting updates, it became very clear that we weren't going to be able to have Regents exams. And that was a benefit to all of our students and teachers in that it removed the pressure of moving faster at a specific pace through the curriculum. It's a very different expectation coming into this year with everyone having an expectation with all this time to prepare that those assessments will be in place. And so, our goal is to work collaboratively with teachers to have them be able to set out a scope and a sequence of the course that's going to align with these models. And it's something that, to be, upfront and honest about it, again, our teachers have never been through something like this. So they're building the airplane, if you will, in the air. But they're doing it in a really collaborative way to make sure that our kids have similar experiences. But, absolutely understand, please know that the pace of instruction is why there's so much time and effort being put into this in the summer so that teachers can understand what do those off days look like. Is it project-based learning where students can work independently with some guardrails with teacher check-in? That suits certain needs, but it doesn't suit all needs, especially in a high school. Or is it something that's very much teacher-directed? I will share with you that one of the concerns as a parent of 3 students at home myself, 2 in high school, 1 in middle school, and then listening to our own students as we have, Mr. Provenzano and I held a student forum, listening to our kids talk about they've never worked harder in that virtual setting. And one of the reasons for that is that without knowing what these parameters were and without knowing what the assessments were going to be, there was a lot of independent instruction. And students really, normally they're used to the teachers providing the content in some shape or form, as Mr. Provenzano's talked about, the modality of learning. And so they felt a big onus for that. Teachers reported the same thing, that they've never worked harder. And it's because that model is just so foreign to them to not be there to provide content, to guide them through those common misconceptions that arise when they're really looking at difficult concepts, right? So I think it's, having that opportunity to understand what is the end. Our teachers are really pros at backwards planning and understanding what the assessment is, how much time do I have to get there, and then what do I do with the time that I actually have kids in session, and then how am I going to direct them out of session so that they don't feel like they're doing this all by themselves.
I really also believe one of the pearls of this, COVID experience will be the continuity and the expectation of narrowing down the focus, making sure that our curriculum is guaranteed and viable across all grade levels and all schools. So it doesn't matter which school you're going to, those expectations, those standards, and best practices will be applied because the time is so precious and effective. And we've had the gift of talking to different children, and they've shared overwhelmingly that they love their teachers and they enjoy those interactions. They're better for those interactions, and I know that our teachers feel the same way. I'm confident as we move through this that coherence will make those engagements that much more meaningful and relevant because the time is going to be precious, and there'll be multiple different ways because they want to reach out and they want to connect both parties, students and teachers.
Yeah, and I have to say it's probably one of the most powerful experiences we've had in the last 6 months is just sitting there listening to, 15, 16, 17-year-olds ask us for more accountability and more engagement because they recognize that the motivation in the spring with all the unknowns was very difficult for them. And they're asking for structure and asking to be in school, but also understanding the safety concerns that are involved in it. They were really an outstanding group. We had kids from both 10th, 11th, or I say both, but all 3 grade levels, 10th, 11th, and 12th, and really looking forward to this and understanding it's not what they want. It's certainly not what anybody wants, but they're going to do the best they can to make the best of it.
We'll take 1 or 2 more questions and then
Mr. Provenzano, I just wanted to I know there's a lot of comments still coming in about the virtual model. And, you know, a lot of us build our master schedules in our schools. And we can do that because we know who the students are, we know what courses they need, and we know the available teachers that we have to teach those courses. So it's easy to build that model. And I do understand the catch-22 between making a commitment and then knowing the model. But I guarantee you that we're all pretty good at putting pieces together in a puzzle. And I think part of the reason it's been a little vague is we don't know the students. I don't know who they are yet. We don't know the needs that they're going to have, and we certainly don't know the population of teachers that we're going to have to access and teach. But guaranteed, once we get that information, I know that each of our buildings are going to be able to put together the pieces of the puzzle and present it to you in a way that I think will make a little more sense because you'll be able to see it.
As you look at the presentation, the pieces in yellow when it comes to that virtual component, you know, it's, in my opinion, right, as an educator and leader, we want our kids in our schools. We want our kids interacting with our staff. And sometimes that might not be the best option for personal circumstances, but these are the attributes in yellow that we feel are the most important qualities to consider when there is so much ambiguity. It is about those self-directed learners. It's about, you know, especially for our younger learners, who could be supported at home to make sure that, you know, standards are being met and work is being completed, and when the computer's on and the interactions are occurring, that, you know, they're meaningful. Be assured that it will be a Fairport teacher primarily, and we'll be using our online tools. But Mr. Dunn said it perfectly. We still need to understand who those learners are. And I'm really proud of the fact, and I'll leave it in this, that our educators were the ones, the first people that I heard the very next day saying that they want this, that they want to interact with our children. So it doesn't surprise me, and I'm really proud of that. And knowing that is another mitigating factor for me, that it will make it work. We'll make it work, and it will be a successful experience for these children as developed or shared above.
So can I just ask one more question, because I think it really needs to be asked. So for kids who are not in school, you know, on those hybrid days, right? Yeah, the kids who are not in school on those hybrid days, and they may be in a daycare situation or whatever, will there be some grace given to check-in times or working or whatever? Because I think that's a big, you know.
Absolutely. Anything that a teacher does live is going to be recorded so that it's there and at the ready for when parents are home and able to do that with their children, 100%.
That's interesting. You know, it's the range of comments that I receive. They're really balanced, and that piece right there, and that's a credit to our administrators, our directors as well. You know, understanding that there's kids that will have different family needs. So what we provide, it needs to be flexible and it needs to be responsive, because we do and we are required to do daily attendance, and we need to make sure that we have a good pulse on how our students are doing and how they're feeling and performing. But we also need to be flexible to the range of needs here, and that's to the credit of our administrators who are right on the ground floor with our kids, that it needs to be accessible at various times throughout the day.
And we saw last spring that some of our middle school, high school kids, that their most work completion was later in the evening. That's when they were really on and on fire. And so the day for the students, especially the remote and the virtual, can be flexible to meet the needs of the student themselves.
Absolutely. I have teachers in my building that have children.
Yep.
And those kids are going to be in daycare during the day and not doing their homework until at night when the teachers are able to actually work with them. So 100%, we get it, and we're going to be flexible.
One thing I want to just, from the chat line, it's come up a couple different times. I have our tech director, Mr. Tom Devitt. I have a computer at home. It's an old Chromebook. It's an older Chromebook. It's, 4 years old. And we're able to get on Fairport apps using our Fairport tools. That's a viable strategy? Are you on?
We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. The questions that they had about the Chromebooks, what models, if you can find them at Best Buy, anything between $300 and a little bit over is decent, but anything at $200 will work as well. And if the students actually log in as themselves, our entire environment is set up for them. So there really is not a lot of setup, not a lot of software to be done. We calibrate that entire environment for them.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, I saw that question because, we're blessed and fortunate to be able to do that. But I also want you to know as a greater community and obligation as a public institution, that's why those Chromebooks are a priority for us to get. But I do know that the questions were out there, so that's why I'm asking that. We prefer them to be ours because it is a public school and it is our obligation and responsibility to provide that. But there are questions out there about can they use their own devices and will their own devices work? And our systems are set up to be able to work from a cloud base.
Yeah, absolutely. They're all internet-based systems. We've been shifting to those for years, so we would have the ability to have any device work and low-cost devices that are internet-only, like the Chromebooks. So it is ready to go. We've had our orders of Chromebooks in for weeks now. We're just getting daily updates from the distributors. There's distributors that are having difficulty. And a lot of orders that were placed have been canceled for other school districts, just in bulk. But we've split orders. We've ordered from different distributors. We're trying to get bunches of different devices all over the place to try to do whatever we can to get as many more devices in here. We do have a lot of devices in the district as well, and we are looking at hybrid ways of actually deploying as many devices as we can in the priority areas as much as possible in lieu of whenever those deliveries come in as well.
So as we start the year, there'll be communications on how to pick up devices and how we'll be prioritizing them. So be assured that communication will be coming. So thank you, Mr. Devitt, and thank you for your team's commitment to and accessibility to bringing this to our families and staff and students, of course.
Mr. Devitt.
One last question.
Brett. I just have a lot of parents asking, can you give us the exact model the school uses? Some parents want to be as close to what the school is using since kids are already used to that in the classrooms.
Yes, it's a Lenovo 500E. It's also a Lenovo 300E. So anything from Lenovo will work. We've had success with Samsungs and also Dells as well. We've had a lot of success with a lot of vendors, so it's really, there's not a lot to be too leery of. If you really get the cheapest of the cheap, you get what you pay for. So right around the $300 mark is really a nice sweet spot, but there's a lot of quality in a lot of different vendors. They all have the same internals in many cases.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just, one more? I know that we talked about the flexibility in, kids being in daycare, and will that be an option for the virtual kids as well, that may be in different situations, or, will there be flexibility in completing their work, in taking attendance, and things like that? Will that be, I know you guys haven't gotten to the nuts and bolts of that, but would that be kind of a built-in system that either could be or is?
I would like to think yes, absolutely. I think we're dealing with children. We're dealing with children in a very unique circumstance. So I think flexibility is key for all of us, whoever we are, whether we're talking as a parent, whether we're talking as a teacher, whether we're talking as a principal or as a student. We all have to be flexible. This is completely unprecedented, and I think we're all doing the very best that we absolutely can. I think once we know who our kids are that are going to be taking advantage of this virtual opt-in, and then we know who the teachers are, then it's going to be about building classrooms. I know a lot of parents are wondering, are they going to be grouped with classmates at the same grade, or is it going to be multiple grade levels? It's too soon to know because we don't know how many kids we're even talking about. So we'll get there. We're just not quite there yet, but will we be flexible? Absolutely, we will be flexible.
Just would want to add to that, since they are going to be Fairport teachers, they're pros. They understand that they're not going to ever see these kids any of the 5 days. So the importance of connecting with them is critical. The importance of getting to know who they are as learners, how they learn best. This is what our Fairport teachers will do in this virtual model, and they will really craft kind of a learning plan for each of the students in there so they can be successful. I mean, that's, I'm pretty sure, what you're going to see in the virtual model as the Fairport teachers assess who they have in front of them.
The one thing that I'm really proud about, and it was a focus area, is the level of consistency. You know, there was a lot of copying and pasting on each one of these slides. And as you were, listening to a middle school principal, you could have been up here in the K-5. Or if you were in the high school, the principles still remain the same, even though you're at a different level. So I'm really proud of that continuity. I'm proud of that commitment to making sure that we are consistent and mindful of all the nuances. And I appreciate the level of commitment from our administrators, and I know that our teachers are pining to get in, and they're ready to make it their own and do it, what Mr. Dunn said, ways that our educators do better than anyone. So, with that, if there's some closing thoughts from our parents, this is your evening. I'll give you one last final opportunity to say some thoughts.
So I guess I would just say that I know that there are still some unknowns, and I know that parents who, either were going to do virtual are made that decision, and who want their kids to go made that decision. And I know that there's still a group of parents who are in the middle and don't have all the answers. And, and I would just say that, our house is kind of divided too. And, you make the best decision for your family, and you make the best decision, that you can. And you make the best decision based on, what you have. And as much as we can have now is where we're at. And, just know that we understand that it's a hard decision, and we understand that it's it's not a make everybody happy decision, but it's just something that has to be done, and this is where we're at. And, it's one or the other at this point, and, we're just going to have to make the choice and move on and go from there.
Mrs. Driscoll.
I would just kind of like to echo what Kelly said, but also say I'm so proud of some of the parents that have sent in questions and how thoughtful they are, considering all the stress that parents are under and our staff is under, our administrators are under. This is just such a confusing time, and we will continue to work to get you answers, to get you information. It never seems to come quick enough, and I know that's scary, but I have the utmost faith that everyone in this room is working day and night, sleepless nights, worrying about how to best support the children in Fairport. And that's their number one priority, and that's my number one priority as the K-5 rep, is to make sure that your voice is heard. So continue sending me questions. I will do my best to get them answered for you. And please utilize your PTA building reps at the building you're in. They are also an advocate for you.
Mrs. Driscoll and Mrs. Hodge, thank you for your partnership and your advocacy. You definitely have and continue to make this process as collaborative and partner-driven as possible. We learn from the advocacy, and we use it to inform where we can definitely make those deliberate choices to serve our community. And as I said in the beginning, most of this is driven by the guidance that we have to support healthy and safe environments in this world pandemic. I'm going to ask Mr. Sliz to share some closing thoughts, and then I'll finally sign off.
As I have said to you many times, as other board members have too, this is a constantly evolving process. And even on the first day of school, it's going to continue to evolve. As educators, we know that at the drop of a hat, sometimes you've got to change your lesson plan, sometimes you've got to monitor and adjust because you've got a fire drill, or there are all sorts of things that are constantly going to be changing, and this is just evolving, and if we could just continue to understand that, and that we're going to be making the best decisions for the kids. And the school board, we communicate regularly. We've been communicating very regularly throughout this whole process since March when the shutdown began. So we are working diligently to make sure that this is the best for the kids.
In the most admirable fashion. And my respect and admiration goes out to each of you and your passion to do and be the best for our children. You know, someone said to me in March, I can't remember who it was, the closing schools, that was the easy part. It's the reopening is what's going to be challenging. And I think we're all experiencing that. And we're learning and we're open and we have a process that is guided by principles. And I'm hopeful as we go into our next phase where we bring in our staff, where we solidify plans and put meat to the bones, that this plan will come to life for the benefit of our children and support our families as we navigate through this uncertain time. There'll be more communication in the future. Please stay tuned. Grateful for your partnership. I'm honored and privileged to be the superintendent of the Fairport Central School District and work with such an amazing school community. Thank you.